Jonathan Martin, as I mentioned before the break, your latest piece for Politico is titled Inside the Quiet Republican Effort to Flip John Fetterman. In it, you write this, quote, whenever he's asked in public or private about a switch, he invariably cites two statistics to explain how baffled he is about why people would even ask the question. There is Fetterman's record of voting with Democrats 93% of the time, and the running joke he has with his Republican colleague, fellow Senator of Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick, about how he, Fetterman, somehow polls better with Republicans than the state's actual GOP senator. J. Mart continues, Fetterman, however, is shrewd enough of a political operator to know exactly why he has alienated his party and become a Republican favorite. It may have started by standing with Israel when most of his colleagues became horrified with the Likud government's actions in Gaza following the 2023 Hamas attack. Where Fetterman does not play the fool is on his potential leverage in the chamber. He brought up the Democrats' net 4-seat scenario without my prompting, all but taunting his current party about how much they may soon need his vote. If we flip 4 seats in the Senate, who is the number 51 for the new majority, he asked, alluding to himself. So Jonathan Martin, he seems to be enjoying his place right now as a darling of Republicans in many ways.
Well, he's having a good time because he's a pretty savvy, media operator. He understands what's going to get him on Fox and the things he has to say, and he does it. And now he wants to talk more about the sort of fractures in the party over Israel, which are certainly real. There's no doubting that. But talking about Trump derangement syndrome is not exactly a sort of a real scholarly discussion about Democratic divisions. That's about a sort of dog whistle, and it works. Look, I think the real news here, Willie, is the scenario that I laid out. What does happen if we get down the road? This is a big election for Democrats. They find a way to net 4 seats. They're on the doorstep of 51. They're about to have a majority for Trump's final 2 years. Trump and Thune pick up the phone to Senator Fetterman and say, let's do a deal. And I still think today it's unlikely that he would do that. I think the more likely scenario, Willie, he just runs through 2028, finishes out his term as a Democrat and doesn't run again. But look, there's going to be a lot of horse trading and a lot of conversations if this Senate map does really turn for Democrats and they can get 51 seats, because then Fetterman, to borrow a phrase, Joe, holds a lot of cards.
Well, same cards that Joe Manchin held. And, of course, Democrats always hated Joe Manchin. I mean, across the country, the grassroots people couldn't say enough bad things about Joe Manchin. I wonder whether they prefer Joe Manchin or the Republican that's in there right now. And same thing with Fetterman. I used to always joke that when I got to Washington, I realized, because I voted against my party occasionally, maybe I voted with them 90%, 91% of the time. Yeah. And, man, you would have thought I was a Marxist. And I always joked, in Washington, it's kind of like The Godfather. You don't get any credit for being loyal to the family 95% of the time.
Right.
But the stupidity, just think about this. I understand Fetterman says things that aggravate Democrats, that aggravate that. I totally get it. I look at some of the things he says and I roll my eyes as well. Right. But he votes with the party 93% of the time. When he becomes a Republican, he would vote against the party probably 93% of the time. Democrats need to figure out how to deal with somebody that doesn't march lockstep with them on Israel and some of these other issues, because we're actually old enough to remember when there were a lot of Democrats that talked and voted this way, and there were a lot of Republicans that talked and voted like moderate Democrats. Better to have him inside the tent than outside the tent.
Well, especially if you're talking about just control of the Senate floor. Look, the most crucial vote, as you know, you cast as a senator is the first vote when you vote for the leader of your party. If he votes for John Thune to control the floor in the next Congress, you have a Supreme Court vacancy. I mean, that's the ball game right there. You know, if Democrats control the floor and there's a vacancy, they almost certainly would sit on it following the McConnell precedent for the final 2 years of President Trump's term. I think there would be huge pressure on them. But, if it's still the GOP in control, there's no question that they're confirming a vacancy on the court.
You know, J. Mart, a lot of people obviously talking about what Democrat may be able to step up, be a national leader, possibly win in 28. And whenever Governor Pritzker's name comes up, you have grudging respect. Other people like him, but there's still a lot of question marks around him, whether he has what it takes to actually win in 28. You actually sat down on your On the Road podcast with Jonathan Martin. You sat down with him. Let's take a look at this clip where you ask him about his potential 2028 primary rival, Rahm Emanuel.
You know, he's done a whole lot of positive things, and I understand why he's a public servant. Like he believes himself to be a public servant. He's been doing it most of his life, and so I understand why he wants to run for president. So I applaud that. I mean, I don't know. You know, I mean, I'm not sure. I know that he's trying to pick a lane and decide whether he's going to run. I think that we have had great people come out of Illinois to lead this nation, and I would hope that if he actually did get elected, that he would be one of those great people.
Well, you mentioned pick a lane. He clearly is trying to position himself more toward the center of the party. Is that, for example, one of the areas where you guys disagree, that he's taking some stances that are pretty combative toward the left? Is that what you have in mind?
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in going after one piece of the party or another piece of the party. I think Democrats have made mistakes. There's no doubt about it, and I think it's okay to call out mistakes.
J. Mart, was it clear to you after talking to Governor Pritzker that he wants to run for president in what's sure to be a big, robust Democratic primary coming up here pretty soon?
Well, and big and robust, just in Chicago alone, Will. I mean, even the city of big shoulders may not be able to enough to contain J.B. Pritzker and Rahm Emanuel. That was a striking part of our conversation because Pritzker is an affable guy. He doesn't throw a lot of elbows in his own party. And you could see in his body language and his tone there that he and Rahm aren't BFF there. And he doesn't like Rahm moving to the center and whacking the left. He wants to be a sort of candidate for both factions of his party. He wants to be the sort of Goldilocks candidate, if you will. He's not too moderate for the left. He's not too left for the center. And he obviously is sort of pegging Rahm as a factional candidate just for the center who wants to alienate the left. You saw it right there as he's, articulating that about his fellow Chicagoan. I clearly think Pritzker wants to run. He's up for a third term as governor, guys, this fall in Illinois. And I think he's going to use that as a springboard and a platform to run for president in 2028. And don't forget, most candidates for president, they don't quit their campaigns. They just run out of money. He's never going to run out of money in his primary in 2028, so he can stay in for a while.
The new episode of On the Road available now. Politico's Jonathan Martin. J. Mart, great to see you as always. Thank you.